that people don't really treat adolescents for being adolescents. They try to put them in one of the two categories. And if you can think back, and I always try to take parents here, and they have a hard time going because I think most people black out adolescence because there's a reality to it's a very awkward time of life, right? There's a piece in that where if you can think back to be like 13, 14 years old, and let's say you're standing in the lunchroom, right, and you're holding your tray, and your two best friends are out sick that day, and you're trying to go, now who do I sit with? And that feeling of angst, that feeling of being, just against the world, it's like I try to take people back there because that's where teenagers live most of the time. They act cool, they act like they're adults, they do this thing, but they have a disdain for adults, which is very strange. But they judge themselves by how cool they are, by how many adult experiences they've had. So they really are that level of dichotomy. They're psychologically, their brains are going through all kinds of stuff. Ken touched on that a little bit, but that's very, very important for understanding drug abuse and dependence and addiction, because the reality is a teenager, if they start using chemicals, they're going to start using like an addict most of the time. They don't have that shut-off switch in their brain. Their brains physiologically can't reuptake a lot of the chemicals that they're putting in there, which means that they're going to drink. No teenager goes on and goes, I'm going to have a beer with my steak. You know what I mean? And if they do, that's usually the teenager you don't have to worry about. Most are drinking for an effect. They're getting high for an effect. And I'm going to get into talk about smoking weed here in a second too, because that is been now turned into kind of the little stepbrother of drugs. Nobody treats that like a drug anymore. But I haven't, in a long time, I haven't met a heroin addict or an opiate addict or anything like that didn't start out by smoking weed. And a lot of people miss that. And some of that is necessary to understand, because when you're talking about understanding severity and you're talking about understanding actually doing something for a child, when is it a problem? The first time they put chemicals in the body. And people, that bar has been moved farther and farther and farther back. Whether it's a phase, whether it's this thing, whether it's I did that when I was in college, all these justifications and rationalizations are all lovely ways of being in denial, basically. And I'll get to that in a second. But going back to where I started, understanding that these guys' brains are not ready to handle the chemicals they're putting in. That's actually why they set the drink. They're not equipped to handle these things. And if you look at stuff, one of the websites I always recommend to parents is there's drthirststone.com. And he talks about the actual development of the brain and then what the effects of different chemicals do to that brain. All right? And it's Thirststone, it's Thurstone. Thirststone. I always give him hell because he's Thurststone. It's associated with weed. We actually did a tour with him. We had shirts that say everyone must get Thurststone. It was pretty funny. So there's a good hope. But the point being with that is if you look at the brain up until puberty is kind of docile. It really is. It's kind of going through its thing, and then puberty hits, and you just watch it light up all over the place. And what I mean by light up is the development is starting to happen. I won't get into boring pharmacology and different physiology explanations, but for the purpose of this discussion, some of them are really, really important. Part of it, and y'all know this if you have a teenage child or have had a teenage child, when puberty hits for a lot of these kids, parents turn from like gods to idiots in a kid's mind. It's like you were the one who had all the answers. Puberty hits, and all of a sudden they're pushing against everything you actually say. Well, part of that parents don't understand is physiology sets them up to do that, because that's actually how they change from children to adults. They push back, they question your thing, they do this thing, they foreclose on your ideas, and that's actually how they learn how to develop some of their own understanding of life and some of their own belief system. So that's actually really critical. As much as it's a pain in the butt for you guys, it really is an important part of life. Teenagers are supposed to be kind of annoying. They're supposed to do that. They're supposed to push. But you go back in that piece, it's like as that's happening, a lot of other stuff's happening. You don't know if a teenager's going to walk through the door and be the sweetest kid you've ever seen, or be like Linda Blair from The Exorcist. It's like which kid's coming? I don't know. You watch this happen because emotions are firing all over the place. Hormones are firing all over the place, and they're trying to figure out who they are. They're trying to develop into young adults, right? And they're going to bounce around. They need to do a lot of that in order to form. When you throw chemicals into the picture, a lot of things happen. Number one, I think it multiplies normal teenager by probably about 5,000. So you get the highs and lows become way more extreme. And I'm not talking even about when they get to opiates. I'm talking about any chemical use that starts happening, okay? Because their brains, again, aren't equipped to handle that, so they start firing all over the place. I'm going to take a second because I think it's important to talk about what happens when THC hits the brain. Okay? THC is delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol. That's the drug that gets you high in pot. All right. There's a reality to that drug, like I said, is treated like this, this kind of innocent bystander. There's even people, that are pushing, gotten it legalized in states and all this stuff, because apparently it does no harm to people. I think it's probably the most dangerous chemical that an adolescent can put in their brain. I'm going to say it again, the most dangerous. People go, no, that's crazy. I didn't say physically the most dangerous. I'm talking about psychologically the most dangerous. No other drug affects the brain like weed does, all right? When somebody puts THC in their brain, it is a kind of a broad spectrum. It hits every area of the brain. Two of the major parts that it hits are the hippocampus and the amygdala. So you're talking about pleasure and you're talking about memory. Why is that critical to teenage development? Well, the way people are supposed to develop is they go through life and they learn life on life's terms through experience. I study for a test, I feel good about it, it's cool, my memory records that, this is a positive thing to do. I lied to my dad and I left the thing out in the lawn and he caught me and it rusted, but I told him it wasn't me, it was somebody else, and now I kind of feel bad, it records the memory, I shouldn't lie. I did this thing, I feel good, etc., etc. That's life on life's terms skills starting to come in, right? The problem is when someone saturates their brain with THC, and the way that works is actually pretty fascinating. The brain is full of all these things called CB receptors, which is basically the little conductors that send the synapse where they're supposed to go and do that when you're an adolescent. And that's exactly what THC targets. It goes to that, and it sits and basically gives young people an emotional memory wipe. So they don't really develop emotionally the way they're supposed to. In fact, most of them stay stuck where they started getting high, and a lot of them even regress beyond that. And if you're honest with yourself, or if you know people that smoke pot well into their 20s, 30s, they may be really smart people, they may be successful people, but if someone's still getting high especially, they're probably still stuck emotionally where they started getting high. They could be 45 but 15 emotionally. And that stuff really comes out when it comes to dealing with emotional things that happen, emotional commitment, things that require vulnerability, such as that. And those are major pieces as far as growing up goes. So the reason I stress that is because the other thing that happens when somebody gets emotionally stuck, intellectually they don't stop growing, all right? And some of the kids that I deal with, some of the kids that you would even just define as chemical dependent, or even just in the beginnings of drug abuse, are brilliant kids. But once they start getting high, once that magic happens for them, and that's what really does happen for these kids that are going to be at risk of using these other drugs, there's a piece of that where emotionally they get stuck, but intellectually they keep going. And they're smart kids. So see, emotion and intellect are supposed to grow together. Well, when emotion stops, it leaves intellect to go all over the place. That's why potheads almost make sense. I mean, if you ever listen to a pothead, they almost make sense. And at the very end, he goes, you go, wait a second, how'd that happen? Because they're intelligent, but there's nothing backing it up. And there's no depth backing it up. Why is that key? Because the bigger that gap gets between emotional and intellectual development, the more problems they're going to have. The other thing that starts happening is they become experientially advanced. Every teenager wants to be rebellious. I won't say every, but most. Most teenagers want to be rebellious, they want to push the envelope, they want to do things, but they have natural inhibitors. Whether it's something you told them, something they learned here, some piece of conscience that says you probably shouldn't do that. When someone's using chemicals, especially THC, it deadens those inhibitors, and so they step out there more with other drugs, sexually, illegal stuff, all of that starts to happen, okay? But one of the issues that's not talked about with drug abuse and addiction ultimately is this, and this is my little self-worth scale, because if you go back to what I talked about, teenagers already struggle with self-worth because they're teenagers. They're treated like second-class citizens in most areas of society. That's just reality. And if you ever want to get some insight to how they think, sit and actually listen to them. There's a good friend of mine was actually running a meeting one time. I work with a bunch of people in recovery, young people, and he was sitting out. There's two kids sitting outside missing the meeting. He went outside and he was like, "Hey guys, get in the meeting, get in the meeting." Like, no, we're just sitting here talking. He's like, "Well, yeah, great, you're talking. Come on, get in the meeting." He goes, "Well, what are you talking about?" He's like, "Well, we're talking about, I think we feel inadequate because we are inadequate." Right? And he's like, "What do you mean?" And they laid this thing out, and he had to end up sitting down on the curb with them and listen to him. And they kind of forgot about the meeting because what they said in that moment was really, really telling about young people. They're not first-class citizens. They don't own their own cars, their own houses. They don't have this vote and things. You know what I mean? And so there's a piece of that where they're always going to feel a little bit second-class. And second-class citizens are set up to have that already exacerbated low self-worth, which sets them up to be really susceptible to drug use. Okay? And I say it like that because one of the pieces, parents always go, "Well, what can I do if my kid hasn't gone on drugs yet? What can I do if I do this?" And my simple answer to that is treat them like first-class citizens. Listen to them. Give them a voice. Give them some more power in their life. You know what I mean? And it's hard to do when you're dealing with a teenager who's rambunctious and pushing and doing all these things, right? But if you go to the guts of a teenager and you talk about, say on a scale of 1 to 10, their self-worth, okay? I would say a good level of self-worth is probably a 7. We'll go ahead and do that, right? Some of you may have been like 10s, like you never had issues, you never went through anything, you never had these problems or things. If that's you, that's awesome. Just know that you are abnormal, okay? Because teenagers struggle, it's honest, right? Because teenagers struggle, whether it's body image, whether it's this thing, whether it's that thing, you know, they struggle. The drama queenness of teenagers, like, it's the worst thing in the world, it's the best thing in the world, that thing that goes on with them, right? That's, again, a normal part of maturation, but because of that, they have self-worth issues. They're going through that. And you'll catch that. I don't use the word self-esteem on purpose, and I'll get to that in a second. So as they're struggling with that, right, that puts them, say, at a 7. But that kid's going to be okay. You know, they're going to bounce around. They're going to figure things out. They're going to go through life, so forth. In my experience, the kids that I deal with that are truly susceptible to heavy dependence problems and addiction problems, we're more like down here, like somewhere between a 2 and a 3. It doesn't matter why. You know what I mean? I wasn't, you know, I was parented well. I had this. None of those things are the issue. You know, and people always try to find these deep, dark issues. If you ask my honest opinion, I think some of us are just born with a lower self-worth, okay? This kid doesn't stand a chance if they start using drugs, because if they start using, they're gonna fall in love like I did, and I'll explain that in a second. This kid's still at risk, but may have a little bit more leeway, okay? I'm somebody, and I'll give you a little bit of my understanding, and this is important, when you talk about real addiction. The first time I used chemicals, I absolutely fell in love. I didn't fall in like, I didn't fall in I'll call you next week, I fell in absolute love, okay? And a couple of things happened. This is really important. It was the first time I'd ever felt that comfortable in my own skin. And I can go back and remember, I was, you know, 11, almost 12 years old. I was young, Northern California, my brother, all of his older friends who were the coolest human beings in the ever. And I watched these guys, and I remember being conflicted from all the talks that we'd have at school. You know what I mean? Like McGruff the crime dog would come in, and he would tell us, don't get high. And I'm never getting high. You know, and he's like, basically your butt will fall off if you get high. And I was conflicted because I watched these guys, and they were the coolest people ever, but they were using, which is bad, but they all had their butts still, so maybe, you know, and this is all going through my head. I remember watching these guys. I watched them like out my living room window, then on my bedroom window. I'm outside behind a bush, and I literally crept close to these guys. First couple of times it didn't even work, you know what I mean? I tried to get high, I didn't understand why. Third time, did a bong hit, and this magic happened. And it was truly a transcendence, you know? And somebody like me, when chemicals hit that bloodstream, now again, I'm an addict, and I know that, but when it hits that brain chemistry, it's over, you know what I mean? Nothing had ever made me feel that good, and in fact, not only did I want to do it again, but I also found that I got angry at all these people that had told me to never use. My folks said don't get high, my teachers and McGruff, and all these people said drugs are horrible. Well, they felt better than anything I had ever felt. So the reality was, what did I do? I went, they must, A, ever not gotten higher. They're just lying to me to keep me from this greatest thing ever. That's important, because don't lie to kids about chemicals, because all their friends are going to tell them the truth. If you go, drugs are horrible, and you'll feel bad and your head will fall off. That's not true, okay? The reality in that is drugs feel good. In fact, as an addict, I only had 2 kinds of drugs. There was good drugs and there was great drugs. That was it, right? There was no bad drugs, you know what I mean? There was some I didn't like as much. But this is the thing they're going to hear from their peers. This is the thing they're going to be exposed to. They're saturated by this, the media, every rap song, everything. You know what I mean? It's not going, drugs are bad, kids. That's not the sell. You know what I mean? In fact, it's the opposite. So I say that because there's a reality to kids need to know the truth. An honest thing to say is drugs feel great. The problem is, if you like them, it's going to create a lot of problems for you. And if you love them, it's going to create immense problems, and it really could kill you. You know? And something I want to say, and this is really important, because people come to these things and they always say, well, yeah, sure, if you're that level of addict and this and that. Nobody would have picked me out of a crowd as an addict. I look way more like I get high now than when I got high. It's true, you know, the whole, Duck Dynasty thing, right? Started as a joke, and I've kept it for 4 years. I don't know how that happened. But I just tell people my hair migrated. The reality in that is I was a very good double life kid. You know what I mean? I grew up in the equivalent of West County, you know what I mean? In the posh areas. You know, I never went wanting. Life was good. My parents did well. They did these things. That was not the issue. My parents are the reason I got high. The reason I got high is because that moment I told you all about, when I fell in love, it was over. Okay? And then it became about, as you know, like Charlie Schumann talked about winning. There was a reality to getting over on everybody, being able I went and got good grades in school. I was a varsity football player. I did all of these things. But being able to get over on everybody and live that double life was just as fun as using. But here's the emotional piece that I think is really, really critical for you guys to understand. Let's say my self-worth set is 2, 3, right? Let's say yours at a 7, okay? We go to a party together and we smoke a joint, right? So we shoot up to a 10, okay? Now, this is a big jump from 2.5 to 10. 7 to 10, it's a little fun, but you can kind of take it or leave it. I'm like, this is the greatest thing ever. You got to understand what it felt like was actually like a positive 37 for me. Like I was in the stratosphere, right? So the next day, we go, we laugh, we smoke dope, we do our thing, we eat some cookie dough, we go home and go sleep, right? It's universal food plotting, right? So we go home, we do the next day, I'm calling you on the phone. And I'm like, what are you doing? Well, I got to study, I got to do some things. Like, okay, wait, you want to get high again? Like, no, I can't really do that this weekend. I got a thing, I got a paper. And I'm going, what are you talking about? This is the most beautiful thing. Well, why would you wait? You're like, well, you know what? Maybe I can next week. Like, actually, it's going to be 2 weeks. That would blow my mind. I couldn't understand. Well, why is that? Because the person that jumped from a 7 to a 10, that's not life-changing. The person like me that went from here to here, it's magic. See, I'm going to keep chasing that thing. Here's the issue, though. What goes up must come down. So this person over time can develop a problem. Because, the self-worth is going to start to drop, situations that go along with using may make that self-worth drop a little lower, et cetera, et cetera. Me, like I said, I didn't stand a chance, because as much as I went up, I was going to come down that much. And I chased it again. So it did not take long for me emotionally to end up down here, waking up at this point, getting high just to get back to where I started at that 2 or 3. Do y'all follow that? And that's really key, because this is really why teenagers have the issues that they have with drugs. It's an emotional addiction as much as it's anything else. The physical aspect of addiction, obviously is dangerous. Obviously, you can die from overdoses. The detox thing is difficult, but it's actually one of the easier parts to deal with when it comes to recovery, because once you get past that physical pull, there's a reality to it, and you really will be okay if you learn how to do some other things. The emotional aspect of it is what does major damage to young people, because once they start getting high and they stop growing emotionally, they're missing all kinds of life hurdles, right? Because people are talking about that, so if they get sober at 17, 18, they can go back and they can regrow those emotional coping skills. They can. You can't go back to being 13, 14, 15 years old and face life the way you face life at that age and jump those hurdles the same way. You just can't. So there's a reality to, even after people sober out, they have to learn how to basically get like prosthetic emotional responses and a conscience and those kind of things, right? But it's very key to understand, if a kid is using, they're in bad shape. And I'm not being the zealot, I'm not, standing over, but there's a piece of this where parents don't pay the kind of attention that they need to drug use and drug abuse, right? I don't know a teenager that's better off for drinking. I don't know a teenager that's better off for using. You know what I mean? So it's like, where do you really start to draw those lines? Once a teenager puts those chemicals in, like I said, they're in danger, right? Now, does that mean every kid's going to grow up and be an addict? Does that mean every kid's going to do this, or they're going to go the way I went? No, it doesn't mean that. But the reality is, it's not just addicts and alcoholics that die from drugs, or die from alcohol, or get behind the wheel of a car at the wrong time, or make a bad decision and get pregnant, or get an STD, or any of those other number of wonderful things that happen as a result of poor decision making when you're using, right? So it's important to look at that and go, there's a lot of forms of denial, all right? The obvious one that people deal with, it's like, if people are going, hey, your kid's using, you're going, no, I'm just going to totally not pay attention to that. If you find drugs in their room and they go, I'm holding it for a friend, let me tell you something. I don't know anyone in the history of man that really held dope for a friend. Maybe it existed, and if, I wouldn't give my weed to my friends if it's open. It's like, there's no reality there, right? They're lying. And if it happens to be the truth, then they're running with people getting high. And if they're running with people getting high, they're getting high. You know what I mean? Now, I say that, and there's always the exception to the rule. I'm not saying there's not that kid, and I've seen him. You know what I mean? He's like the one kid who hangs out. He's the bass player, and like nobody else, he didn't get high, and he's the one. But the reality is, most kids are going to be exposed to drugs. Most are going to try them. A lot of them are going to at least like them, and a lot of them are going to absolutely fall in love with them. And some of that, if you follow the trail I was talking about, because especially with marijuana, it's interesting. Heroin, cocaine, alcohol, they'll throw your life off 30, 80 degrees. They'll massively mess you up, right? We just put you 3 degrees off. And that's why people don't think it's a problem. Let's say we're in the Hawaiian Islands and we're flying from one island to the next. And we get up in the air and our course is 3 degrees off. It wouldn't be a big deal. We go, hey, Oahu's over there. It's simple. Now, if we're flying to Maine on the other side of the country, we're going to end up in Cuba or Canada. And that's why a lot of these kids, they start smoking weed at 14, and you struggle with them, and they're just boneheads. Some of them don't hit major walls till they get like in the middle of high school or even make it off to college. Is it fascinating to me why we have so many kids burn out in their first year of college or drink the way they do? No, a lot of them, it's untreated addiction and alcoholism that's just waiting. It's just festering. And once they hit that level of access, of course they pull their string like that. Okay? So I do say it, and I do, because I think people have gotten that lenient attitude, but it's like denial has a lot of different faces. That's what I started to talk about. It's not just as simple as going, that's not happening. If you look it up, I think it's like the 14 different forms of denial or something like that. It's pretty fascinating on the internet, but it's very accurate. And I listen to parents all day long. And I don't think parents go, I just don't want to look at it, and I want my kid to struggle. Of course that's not why denial's there. I think denial's actually underrated. You know, if you cut your finger off, your body goes into shock so that you don't feel all of that pain. You know, I haven't met a parent whose child was born and they look at it and go, God, I can't wait till you start using drugs. I mean, that doesn't happen. I mean, maybe the weird hippie parent, I don't know, but there's a reality to you. That doesn't happen. So does any parent want to think their kid's on drugs? Does any parent want to think that this could be a major problem? Of course not. So there is an emotional pain thing that's happening that they will protect themselves from. Okay? If your gut says something's wrong, trust me, something's wrong. The number of parents I've dealt with went, you know what, I knew this was going on 2 years ago, but I kind of know maybe it's not a big deal. You know, make it a big deal. In fact, I would say make it the biggest deal. Because if a kid's putting chemicals in their body that's robbing them of their adolescent growth period, their mental capacities, all of that, I don't know of a bigger deal. I mean, people talk about the effect of sugar and carbohydrates on people, but they're using drugs. It's like, if this kid's doing that, they're massively debilitating themselves. You know, delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, our friend THC, sits in your brain for 2 to 3 weeks. If a kid smokes pot on the weekend, they're under foreign management for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. That's reality. Okay, so it's not just as simple as when they're actually under the influence of the chemical. You know, and there's no such thing as social pot smoking. Okay, unless you do it once every 6 months. Yeah. And if you're that, then you're not in any danger. But let me explain. You don't mow the lawn and smoke a cold joint. Okay, you can drink a beer. You're not necessarily doing that to get under the influence. You smoke pot, it's for a reason. You're aiming for that under the influence piece. And I say that to go again. It's not to be, you know, like I said, that abusive with that point, but it really is that key because people don't see it. You know, globalization is a form of denial. That's everybody's doing it. You know, rationalization, which is better known as rational lies. You know, justification. It's not that bad. Any of those number of things. This is what people tell themselves to go, my kid's on danger. So if something's going on with a child, get them in to talk to somebody. My information's up there, but I'm not the only person out there. There's a lot of people out there. You know what? If you're not sure, you don't want to mess with the kid, you go talk to somebody. You go, well, we found this in the tinfoil and the thing in the room. Is that a problem? Yes, it's a problem. You know, we found this homemade bong. That's a problem. You know what I mean? It's like that. All of those things are issues. Yeah. You know, and you know what? I think it's better to err on the side of going and making it a bigger deal than it is than the other. You know, and that's reality. And I say this, and truthfully, this isn't. I'm not trying to say this to scare you guys or to be, but there's a reality of watching people in this field for years and years and years. You know what I mean? It's all it takes is one bad dose. All it takes is one bad hit of something, and it can massively, you know, it obviously kill a kid, but it also could massively change their lives, hurt their brains, do different things. I mean, it really is that quick. You know, I mean, these guys are in massive danger. You know, and everybody starts going, oh, heroin, because it's the big H word in that drug. You know what I mean? But trust me, there's a lot of other killers out there. You know what I mean? And they're equally dangerous and they're equally damaging. So, you know, do what you got to do to get between. You know, there's that. Remember that old commercial? I think it was Carol O'Connor, wasn't it? The Archie from Archie. Yeah. He said, "Do what you got to do to get between your kid and drugs." Mm-hmm. He lost his son to heroin overdose. Yeah. That's why he did those commercials. You know what I mean? So this is scary. And you know what? I was 11, 12. I was 9 when I started drinking. You know what I mean? Yes, that's young. But 11, 12, start smoking pot. Not that. You know, bizarre. By 13, most of them have at least been around it. You know, I forget how little a 13-year-old is on a 12-year-old. Like I see, like, oh my God, I was that getting high. You know what I mean? I didn't have the beard then. You know, got that when I was 14. Sorry.
That's a question.
Yeah,
what about vaping? You haven't mentioned that.
What about vaping? Well, if you're talking about how popular it is and how much kids love to do it, I mean, it's huge. You know,
what are the dangers in vaping, and do you view vaping as a gateway drug because it's intense nicotine?
What is vaping?
You know, that's been debated forever. You know, smoking before vaping, things like that. I don't know that it's a gateway drug in the sense that it makes you as susceptible to chemicals like smoking pot does. But I think just the rebellious nature of it. You know, if you got a kid who's stepping out there and doing that, they very easily could be rebellious and take the next step. So I would look at it more again, kind of from an emotional standpoint. Does that make sense? The problem with vaping is they don't really know what it does to you. You know what I mean? They're still kind of studying it. You know, because I'll see kids get sober and they smoke cigarettes and they'll switch to vaping because they're not going to get off that yet, the nicotine yet. You know what I mean? Because trying to quit heroin and that's enough to get it. You know what I mean? You can get to the nicotine later. But they oh, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm like, okay, it's like inhaling a smoke machine. I can't believe there's nothing wrong with it.
Does it give them a buzz? I mean, because of the intensity of it?
From what I understand, no. You know what I mean? If you didn't smoke and you hit one, sure, just like if you hit a cigarette, it would do it. But the other interesting pieces with vaping, they're doing a lot of hash oils, they're doing a lot of things like that too. You know, that's probably one of the most intense ways to inhale smoke is through vaping. You know, that's, you know, it's one of the things with THC levels, and a lot of it is now as a result of legalization in Colorado and stuff like this, is all the oils are on the market, all the hash oils, THC oils, etc. You know, if you smoked pot in the 90s, you were dealing with 3 to 9% THC. 12 was like killer weed, right? Nowadays, average pot's like 20 to 25%, up to 40%, and the oils are hitting her up to 90%. 90%. That's Afghan hash. I mean, that's a coma. You know what I mean? So, yeah. But as far as the studies, I think vaping's still new enough. There hasn't really been much done that I'm aware of, and they're not finding anything yet that makes it truly bad for you. But you know, pumping that stuff in your lungs, that can't be good. You know what I mean? So,
thank you.
yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you asked that. Anything else I can answer? We got a couple minutes. I think.
Yeah, are the drugs expensive? I mean, how do the kids get the I mean, how much are they?
How do they get drugs?
Yeah. No, the money, there is a money involved here, obviously. How does that happen? Where do they get money?
I mean, the way I mean, everything from, you know, getting money around the house to stealing money to trade to, you know, if you find electronics starting to miss around your house, that's probably what's happening. Dealing drugs, being a leapfrog, which is, I know a guy who can get weed, you give me the money, I get this. Dope fiend commerce, I take a little bit out and it's taxed. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of ways to get drugs. You know, and it's not that expensive to get high. I mean, that's what people don't get. Now, if you get into like a daily heroin habit, sure, you know what I mean, then that's when you see stuff getting pawned, things missing, you know, all the way up to people out doing really, you know, unspeakable things in order to get drugs in the body. So.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So if there's all these, I have a 13-year-old daughter who knows people who gets high.
Yeah.
And she tells me about it, which I'm grateful for.
That's cool.
But, so my tactic up until this point is just to scare her. You know, that person who's getting them doesn't know where they get it, and doesn't know where they get it, and you don't know what they're putting in it, and so anything. I don't know how else do you approach that?
I truly believe, you know, that the most powerful weapon parents have is their love for their child. Okay, that and example. I think those are actually the only two powers you have once they hit adolescence. You know, once you turn from God to idiot. And I say it like that to go, I think be honest, and I think love her, and I think go, look, you're going to be approached by all kinds of people offering all kinds of things. You know, the problem with drugs is people use them and they like them, but then that leads to a lot of really, really bad things for people. You know, and I think when a parent is straight like that with their kid, it leaves that ability to come back and be honest, open. You know, and I think people should have a deal with their kids and go, you know, if you do hit a wall, come talk to me. I'm not going to chastise you. I'm not going to beat you up. I'm going to help you. And that's not done enough, I think, with young people. You know, my father's a full-blooded German. His idea of, you know, it was, why don't you just stop? I was like, thanks, Dad. I love it. You know what I mean? But once somebody's pulled into that, you got to dig. They're under foreign management. You know what I mean? And they're in that place where it's like, now not only did drugs become, you know, this fascinating thing, but when you feel that good, now anybody that tells you not to get high becomes the enemy. That's why you're better off going, look, I can't stop you from making choices, but I can tell you here's the reality of it, and I can tell you I'm always here for you if you hit a problem. You know, and if that's sincere and they know that's real, and you don't abuse that thing when they come tell you something, they will probably come tell you something. You know, yeah.
Can a person, talking about fear, so can a person be allergic? Like, can a person be allergic to weed?
Yeah.
And if yes, what is the side effect? Like, how do you know that you're allergic?
It's actually rare that happens, but there's a lot of, when you say allergic, there's different takes on it. There's the obvious, which is like if somebody actually had an allergy to marijuana, they got a rash or something, that does exist. Okay. More likely is it hits different people's brain chemistry differently. Like some people can get high and laugh and it's fine. Some people get really paranoid. You know, they're starting to find with these high levels of THC now that people are having actually THC-induced psychosis. We out of time? 1 minute. Yeah. 1 minute. Okay. So you know, it's interesting. But the other weird part, the other thing I was going to say is a lot of people look at addiction as an allergy. You know, there are certain people, like I said, when I put chemicals in, it was a magical reaction. There are other people that get high and can take it or leave it. You know what I mean? So that's the other way of looking at an allergy is the psychological piece that happens. Thank you for our time. I know I talked really fast, but if I can answer anything else,